Beneath banyan skies. A story for sleep. Eli closed the door to his apartment softly. There was no rush. The cab to the airport would arrive in 20 minutes. But even now, with his bag packed and passport in hand, he felt the hum of his old life beginning to fade. He had lived by schedules, product launches, appointments, alarms. But tonight, he was letting all that go. He was boarding a plane to India with no grand plan, only a quiet question resting in his chest. What happens when you finally stop hurrying? In the stillness of his hallway, the ticking clock seemed less urgent. The evening air outside was thick with the smell of rain on pavement. He took one last look at the bookshelf lined with unread books, the work laptop blinking quietly in sleep mode, and turned away. The elevator hummed as it carried him down to the street. Raindrops made lazy tracks across the cab's windows as he rode through the city one last time. Streetlights shimmered in puddles. Neon signs blinked their last invitations for the night. He breathed slowly, his hands resting still in his lap. This departure wasn't a sprint, it was a soft dissolve. At the airport, he moved through check-in like a ghost. No phone in his hand, no music in his ears. Just footsteps and quiet decisions. He boarded, settled into his seat, and watched the city fall away beneath him. Above the clouds, there was nothing but dark sky and starlight. He closed his eyes and whispered into the void. Let me be empty for a while. Chapter 1. Delhi greeted him not with a handshake, but with a breath. Thick with incense, masala, and city heat, the air wrapped around Eli like a woolen shawl. The taxi ride from the airport was a maze of horns, shouting vendors, sacred cows, and flashing lights. And yet, in the chaos, there was something oddly rhythmic, something alive and awake that stirred a long-dormant part of him. He wandered through the narrow lanes of Old Delhi, where hanging marigold garlands swung gently from shop fronts and children darted between food carts selling samosas and jalebis. There was laughter, color, and confusion. But beneath it all, a rhythm. He visited Jama Masjid, one of the largest mosques in India, just as the call to prayer began. The sound echoed across the domes, deep and resonant, as pigeons rose into the amber sky. Eli removed his shoes, stepped onto the warm stone floor, and felt something shift inside him. A pause. He spent the afternoon sipping masala chai in a quiet tea stall near Chandni Chowk, watching cycle rickshaws weave like fish through current. The shop owner spoke little English, but nodded with a smile as Eli returned each day. At night, from his small hotel room with whitewashed walls and a humming fan, Eli listened to the distant call to prayer mingling with the clatter of utensils. The sky outside was velvet, the city slowly folding itself into dreams. He didn't check emails. He didn't scroll. He simply lay there, eyelids heavy, listening. He drifted off thinking not of noise, but of pulse. India didn't shout. It sang. Chapter 2. The train arrived with a groan of steel and steam. Eli climbed aboard, found his window seat, and sank into the faded cushion. The journey to Jaipur would take 5 hours, but time was no longer something to manage. His suitcase, once packed meticulously, now hung open and casual at his side. As the train pulled away from the station, Delhi blurred into fields, green and ochre, dotted with grazing cows, temple spires, and thatched-roof homes. Farmers waved from the edge of rice paddies. Children chased behind the train, laughing like bells. A tea vendor walked past, calling softly, "Chai, chai, garam chai." The tea was hot and sweet, laced with ginger, poured into a small paper cup that warmed Eli's hands. He sipped slowly and leaned against the window, feeling the motion of the train gently rock him like a cradle. He stared at the horizon, where sky and earth met in a dusty blue kiss. In that endless stretch of landscape, he saw something familiar: freedom. He watched the terrain shift, acacia trees scattered like thoughts across the land, goats climbing rocky ledges, temples blooming suddenly into view and fading just as fast. At one stop, a woman boarded with her daughter, who offered him a boiled sweet and smiled shyly. Eli accepted with a small bow. In that brief moment, something like connection bloomed, wordless, sincere. He didn't speak much. He didn't write anything down. But later, he would remember it all. The train hummed on. Chapter 3. Jaipur unfolded before him like a painting warmed by sunlight and old stories. The walls of the old city glowed a gentle pink under the late morning sun, soft sandstone hues that made the entire landscape feel like it had been dipped in rose water and memory. He stayed in a heritage haveli, once a nobleman's home, now a quiet guesthouse tucked behind a courtyard of lemon trees. The ceilings were painted with faded frescoes, blue peacocks, red lotuses, elephants mid-step. The floor was cool marble, veined like the clouds that wandered overhead. Eli spent his days walking slowly. He visited the amber fort at dawn, ascending stone steps as monkeys leapt overhead. The sun rose behind him, casting golden light over the fortress and the lake below. Inside, mirrored halls shimmered with morning light, their tiny glass pieces reflecting dreams from centuries ago. He lost himself in the bazaars, bangles clinking, fabrics fluttering, the scent of sandalwood and rose. A young boy sold postcards painted by hand, and Eli bought one, a camel walking beneath a full moon. At the city palace, he watched the changing light on carved windows, and sat still in a quiet courtyard until pigeons gathered around his feet. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. There was a calm here that felt like it had always been waiting. Each evening, back at the haveli, he sat on the rooftop with a simple meal, dal, rice, chapati, and watched kites dance in the dusky sky. Bells rang out from a distant temple. Somewhere, a flute played. He thought, not for the first time, that stillness wasn't silence. Stillness was listening. And Jaipur whispered softly, if you let it. Chapter 4. The road to Pushkar twisted through dusty hills and desert villages, where herders led long trains of camels and women balanced pots on their heads with effortless grace. The land grew drier, quieter, older. Pushkar appeared like a mirage, whitewashed buildings clustered around a sacred lake, ringed with ghats where pilgrims bathed and prayed. The air carried a mix of rose petals, cow dung, incense, and wood smoke. It smelled holy. Eli found a guesthouse with a rooftop view of the lake. Each morning, he sat cross-legged with a cup of chai and watched the sun rise over the water, staining it gold. Bells rang from the Brahma temple, one of the only ones in the world dedicated to the Creator God. Priests in saffron robes moved like flames. He visited the ghats barefoot, the stone warm beneath his feet. Pilgrims cupped water in their hands and murmured prayers, while white cows ambled past. He didn't take pictures. He sat on the steps and breathed, letting the silence settle into his ribs. One evening, he met a wandering sadhu with ash-smeared skin and eyes like wells. They spoke little, sharing only gestures and presence. The sadhu blessed him with a marigold and a smear of vermilion, then walked away. That night, under a blanket of stars, Eli heard drums in the distance. A wedding procession passed beneath his window, bright saris, firecrackers, laughter carried on the desert wind. He smiled to himself. Here, even joy was ritual. He slept that night without dreams. Chapter 5. The train to Jaipur rolled through the Rajasthan plains like a slow-moving mirage. The landscape turned arid, red earth, thorny acacia trees, and distant forts perched on hills like forgotten sentinels. Eli leaned against the window, lulled by the rhythmic sway of the carriage, as vendors passed through offering steaming chai and spicy snacks wrapped in newspaper. When he stepped off the train, the sun greeted him like fire. Jaipur shimmered in the heat. Known as the Pink City, it wore its name proudly, walls and arches awash in shades of rose and coral, giving everything a strange dreamlike softness despite the desert air. Eli wandered through bazaars that buzzed with life. Brightly dyed fabrics fluttered in doorways. Brass lamps and sandalwood carvings caught the light like memories waiting to be bought. A vendor offered him a mango lassi that cooled his mouth but set fire to his imagination with its unexpected depth. He smiled, surprised at the joy something so simple could deliver. He found himself drawn to the Hawa Mahal, its hundreds of small windows staring out like a honeycomb carved by time. Inside, silence reigned. Cool corridors breathed relief from the sun, and he paused to feel the history pressing close but not heavy, like a quiet ancestor at his shoulder. In the evening, he climbed to Nargar Fort. From its ramparts, the city stretched below in gentle chaos, cars like beetles, voices like wind, lights beginning to flicker alive. Eli sat on the ancient stone wall and watched the sunset bathe Jaipur in molten gold. A family nearby shared samosas and laughter, and he felt no need to move. That night, lying beneath a slow-turning ceiling fan in a modest guesthouse, he felt echoes of his childhood, of forgotten books, of questions he once asked but never answered. Jaipur didn't give him revelations. It gave him space. And in that space, something stirred. In his journal, he wrote. Some cities shout. This one wisp. Chapter 6. The train to Varanasi arrived just before dawn, when the sky was still a deep ink blue and the air tasted faintly of wood smoke and wet earth. Eli stepped onto the platform, greeted by a quiet unlike anywhere else, a hush not of silence, but of reverence. Varanasi didn't unfold. It revealed. He took a rickshaw to the old city, winding through sleeping alleys until they opened to the Ghats, stone steps that met the Ganges like a prayer. The river stretched wide and slow, veiled in morning mist. People were already gathering, pilgrims, priests, sadhus, the devout and the curious, all moving with the rhythm of something ancient. Eli sat on the stone steps as the sun rose behind the river. It wasn't loud. It was sacred. Bells rang. A conch shell blew. Women in vivid saris lit tiny clay lamps and set them afloat, their flames flickering as they drifted into the current. He watched an old man lower himself into the water, his hands folded in devotion. The Ganges, they said, could wash away lifetimes. Later, he wandered through the labyrinthine streets, past shrines tucked between doorways, cows chewing quietly beside flower stalls, and walls painted with gods in fading colors. The scent of turmeric, sandalwood, and thyme followed him. In the evening, he joined the crowd at Dashashwamedh Ghat for the Ganga Aarti. Priests in gold and red robes moved in precise arcs, offering fire to the river. Oil lamps spun through the air in patterns older than memory. Smoke curled skyward, carrying incense and mantras. Eli felt his chest rise in unison with the chant, as if his breath was no longer just his own. That night, back in a small guesthouse above the ghat, he wrote only 3 words in his journal before sleep took him. The river knows. Chapter 7. Eli arrived in Rishikesh by bus, weaving through the Himalayan foothills, where pine trees clung to cliffs and the air grew thinner, cooler. The Ganges flowed here too, but younger, swifter, brighter, as if freshly born from snowmelt. There was no ritual here, not yet. Only wildness. He checked into a small ashram tucked between the forest and riverbank. No locks on the doors. No shoes past the gate. Each morning began with meditation, the sound of breath joining birdsong and the gentle rush of water. Rishikesh had no clamor. No horns. No hurry. The streets were lined with bookshops, silent cafes, and temples built like secrets into the hills. Monkeys watched from rooftops. Cows napped in shade. A man played sitar beneath a banyan tree each evening, the notes drifting like smoke into the sky. Eli crossed the Laxman Jula Bridge at sunset, pausing halfway to watch the river shimmer gold. The wind tugged at his shirt like a child, as if urging him to stay. On the other side, he climbed a quiet trail to a hidden waterfall. He stood under it, arms outstretched, letting the cold mountain water wash over him until he forgot who he had been. That night, at the ashram, they chanted softly around a small fire. Someone handed him a simple bowl of khichdi. He ate in silence. He listened to the stories others carried. And when his turn came, he said only, "I came here to forget the noise. But I found something else." Someone nodded. No one asked what it was. He spent his final morning sitting on the river's edge, toes in the water, watching a kingfisher dive and rise again. The breeze was cool and smelled of cedar. Somewhere deep in the forest, a temple bell rang. He didn't rush to the bus. He walked slowly, the sky above him filled with the kind of blue that stays in your dreams. And beneath the banyan skies, Eli knew, he had not come to find answers. He had come to remember how to listen. Chapter 8. Eli stepped off the final train not into a new city, but back into Delhi. A circle, quiet and complete. The city was louder now, not because it had changed, but because he had. He felt its pulse differently, less chaotic, more alive. At the small cafe where he'd eaten his first meal in India, the waiter recognized him and smiled. Back so soon? Eli only nodded and took the same seat by the window. The chai was as sweet and strong as he remembered. The air held its usual weight of spice and humidity, but it didn't press down on him this time. It settled around him like an old shawl. He spent a few more days walking. Not to see anything, but to feel everything. The smell of rain rising off hot pavement. The warmth of a stranger's nod. The weight of his own breath, no longer rushed or shallow. He didn't journal. He didn't photograph. He didn't analyze. He simply was. On his last night, he sat on the rooftop of his guest house, watching planes blink in and out of view against a dusky sky. Somewhere in the distance, music rose from a wedding procession. Drums and laughter. Life. He closed his eyes, placed a hand over his heart, and smiled, not because he had found anything, but because he had stopped needing to. As the stars returned to their places above the city, Eli whispered the words he hadn't known he was waiting to say. "I remember now." And under the vast Indian sky, he fell asleep, not to escape, but to dream. Thank you for traveling with me,